directly from residents about their view on the coal seam gas project that was mooted at the time for Bentley. And it was a mining project that, if it had gone ahead, would have opened up the whole area to fracking. I would argue that as council has now voted twice to ask residents for their view on deamalgamation, it has a responsibility to provide a short yes and no case to residents as soon as possible, so that residents can discuss it further, they can ask councillors for more information, and they can do their own research. As for checking and veracity, I think perhaps the yes and no cases could be run past, say, an RMIT ABC fact check. There's probably other opportunities to have those cases checked as well. Council could then put these concise positions on its website, although many people have told me, and I think the same, it's not the easiest website to navigate. A proportion of the population wouldn't see it. So I think the council could devote 2 of the pages of its next regular letterboxed bulletin into posting the yes and no cases. Perhaps it could also ask the Inner West Independent and the Hub to print 2 short form cases with directions to visit the website. Those less digitally comfortable wouldn't then be left out of the picture. The poll, as we know, is a non-binding referendum, but that shouldn't mean that council doesn't do all it can to present the case, yes, and for and against, to the best of its ability. I think then residents would be in a better position to make an informed choice if they became acquainted with the arguments and they're not taken by surprise with a large report from an accounting firm in August. Thanks for hearing me out.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll just see if we can go back to Michelle Hackey now. Michelle, are you with us? No, it appears not. Okay, if we could go back to the agenda. We've got that there, item 2. Councillor Stamoulis, would you prefer that we go to you to speak to your motion first, or would you like to have the officers speak to the comment that's been provided with the updated information?
Yes, I think that'd be the better way to start, Mr. Mayor. So yes, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go to the General Manager and ask him just to outline the information that's been provided verbally outline the information that's been provided in the office.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, thank you. Yeah, so we're doing our the business cost benefit analysis, as everyone knows. That'll be reported the 3rd of August. We've also got our independent staff survey, which is one of the items requested. And we'll have all those results by the 1st week of August. The Electoral Commission we've been talking to them on the poll question and the 1-page summary and disadvantages. In relation to the poll question, I've actually sent that to them and had feedback. They've already referred it to the Office of Local Government for their feedback, who concur. So both parties, and they've just got back to me this afternoon. I will share that if you give me 2 seconds. I'm not too sure I can share. I'll read it out. Just hang on 2 seconds. So the question is, based on our resolution, said that take a poll of electors on the question of whether the Inner West local government area should be de-amalgamated so as to restore the former local government areas of Ashfield, Leichhardt and Marrickville. So, and then it said hold the poll on the date. But in relation to the question, so the proposed poll question says, in May 2016, Ashfield, Leichhardt and Marrickville councils were amalgamated into one local government area by the state government. Do you support the Inner West local government area being de-amalgamated so as to restore the former local government areas of Ashfield, Leichhardt and Marrickville? That's a simple yes or no question. So that has been to the Electoral Commission and through the OLG. So we have to have that question. I'm going to forward that. So after tonight's meeting, I'll forward that question off to the Electoral Commission so they can finalise their work on the question itself. In relation to the 1-page summary of advantages, disadvantages, we're going to piece that together as we get the advice back from the cost benefit analysis. That will obviously form part of that information, factual information that we put together. And then the Electoral Commission again said that they would review that one pager as they've done with other organisations. Then we'll have the information. We'll put it out we do have a newsletter going out in the early September, distributed in August prior to the election. But we also feel that it needs a flyer separate to that. So we'll have the newsletter, there'll be a piece in that, and then we'll have a flyer which is totally associated with the one pager that has the pros and cons, the factual information. So that information will be done for that. And we will also make sure the Reach newsletter has a save the date flyer in there in relation to it. We'll have a dedicated Your Say Inner West project page. We'll try and make it as prominent as we can on our website, taking on board the comments that some people may not be able to find it. And we'll do updates through our e-news and social media channels, and also do a media release. So we're hoping we'll also make sure the information is available in all community languages as well. So we're hoping through that the engagement team has come up together with that piece that every household will get notified twice, one separately with the flyer and one separately as part of our overall newsletter and a piece in that. So we're hoping that we can make people as aware as we possibly can through that process.
Peter, can I just ask a question? What, related to that, obviously, what's the communications plan for notifying the community of the election itself?
I'll have to take that on notice, Mr. Mayor. I assume we'll have to have that as part of our. I've been focused on this, to be honest. I'm assuming that we've got a plan. I know whether Catherine can add anything, and she knows something that I don't. But in terms of, we need to make sure that in our comms and our newsletter, I suppose, just thinking about it, we'll have to make sure that everyone through those two pieces know that the local government election's on through those two pieces of information, all our media channels as well.
Yeah, can I just indicate, I think that's obviously quite important. I'm sure there wouldn't be a single councillor who would suggest that notifying people of the non-binding poll question is more important than notifying people that the election.
Of course. Yeah.
So that's not, if I can just make that comment that we shouldn't get so distracted by it that we fail to communicate as high a priority the fact that there's an election on that people need to vote.
Yep, no problem. I'll make sure that happens. Thank you.
Further questions for Peter before I go to Councillor Stamoulis?
I've got one.
Yes, Councillor De Cruz.
I noted that Peter said that the newsletter would be available at the beginning of September. Pre-poll actually starts on the 24th of August.
So we'll have the newsletter. I'll get the timing. So we've got two things going out, Margarita. One is the newsletter will be, it said September, October, but I just read it again. The newsletter will be distributed towards the end of August, but I'm also going to have a piece of information, a separate flyer. So there'll be the newsletter goes out, we're going to tell them twice, and then there'll be a dedicated letterbox drop that advises people. We'll make sure gets distributed before pre-poll.
Thanks.
Any further questions? If not, I'll go to Councillor Stamoulis.
Yes, thank you for that summary from the General Manager. It seems very consistent with the motion that's before us that each of those have been covered off in terms of notifying our public, informing them about the debate at hand, and also to inform them about how it's going to take place. So that's wonderful, and I'm pleased to see that work has already commenced. I would like to put forward a further amendment for councillors to vote on. I've also discussed the nature of the question with a number of community members, and I would like that to be put up on screen if possible. So there's an alternative question that I hope, given that there's a lot of information available already to people, and given that they know the background of the merger, this is a simple, efficient and streamlined question saying, do you wish to demerge Inner West Council to restore, that should be not re-establish, but restore, my apologies for that, to restore the councils of Ashfield, Leichhardt and Marrickville. So very, very simple. It doesn't contain the hefty background of the other question that was read out to you before. So I'll leave that up to councillors as to whether or not they'd like to vote on that as an amendment.
Councillor Stamoulis, I think we're on very dangerous ground here. Firstly, we've got an adopted resolution of the council that you voted for to have the Electoral Commission assist the council in developing a question. You've just asked if anyone would like to speak to the amendment, and I'm doing so. We've just had an update from the General Manager that he's proposed a draft question to the Electoral Commission, which they've indicated they think is fair and balanced and clear, and the OLG are now being consulted on that as well. And you've now called an extraordinary meeting and tabled a specific motion, and you're now amending that into a completely different motion that subverts the process that we've already adopted. I don't think your question is necessarily very different from the question which the General Manager has put to the Electoral Commission, but this is not a good process at all, and it reeks of seeking political interference in the drafting of this question, which is exactly what we were seeking to avoid by putting the question to the Electoral Commission. So given this would see council disregard all advice from the Electoral Commission, despite the fact that we've resolved to do that already, I'll just seek advice from the council officers about whether that amendment is in order. Sorry, I'm just putting that question to the council officers.
Sorry, it was on mute. Sorry. I'd have to say it is a bit inconsistent after I've done all of the work, and I'm happy to get Catherine to share the question that I've sent off and got approved from and got support from the Electoral Commission and the Office of Local Government. Yeah, I'd have to say, yeah, it seems a bit. I wasn't thinking that we would be coming back and voting on this question. I thought it was pretty consistent with what we'd already done. So,
Mr. Mayor, if I can speak, please.
Well, you have already spoken to it, Councillor Stamoulis. So, what was your point?
My point is that councillors haven't received any question or any information that a question had been signed.
No. Sorry, Councillor Stamoulis, we've just received an update from the General Manager, who's working as efficiently as possible. He's informed you of a question, which is very straightforward, which has been put to the Electoral Commission, which they've given indicative support for, and they've sent off to the OLG, and you're seeking to subvert that process by moving an amendment that is in contradiction of an adopted resolution of the council. So that's one procedural point, and I still stand by the substantive point that this is really, really a crook political process to seek to go around the Electoral Commission and have a completely political decision about what the question will be, subverts the intention of the resolution. So I'm going to rule that the amendment is... I'm going to rule that the amendment... Sorry, Councillor Passos, if you can desist from interjecting. I don't wish to warn you. If you could desist from interjecting. The amendment is ruled out of order. Councillor Stamoulis, if you disagree with the question that comes back from the Electoral Commission, no doubt you'll call an extraordinary meeting as you've done every week for the last month. But I really seriously ask you to reconsider whether you want to go down this sort of frankly crooked political process. So that the amendment is out of order.
Point of order, Mayor. I don't think we need quite such a punishment to the councillor. I think
crooked. I think that should be retracted. Crooked.
Okay. I would draw crooked, but let's say this. It's completely political to remove the independent electoral authority who've already been engaged in drafting the question. It's just extraordinary. This will send a message to the community that this is a completely political process in which there's no independent oversight at all. Councillor Stamoulis, I'd ask you to withdraw the amendment.
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to change that to that be submitted for consideration by the Electoral Commission. I would be happy to change that, yes.
Okay, I'm happy to incorporate. given that they've already stated their support for the one that the General Manager has submitted to them. So if you could liaise with minute takers about that, Councillor Stamoulis. Councillor Pass, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Are you calling on me?
You're the seconder of the motion.
Yes, I didn't second it actually, but I was a signatory to the extraordinary meeting. You didn't call for a seconder. My point,
sorry, Councillor Passis. I assumed you were the seconder as the person who had seconded the call for the extraordinary meeting. Is there a seconder for the motion? Is there a seconder for the motion? If not, it will lapse.
Yeah, I'll second it. Councillor Hesse.
Councillor Hesse, do you wish to speak to it?
Look, very briefly, Councillor Byrne, thank you. Look, I thank Councillor Stamoulis for bringing this to the council. I think, and I appreciate the update from the General Manager on where it's at. I think hopefully we can have consensus now that we've agreed. Where we didn't have consensus, we've agreed that we will, in fact, put this decision to the community. I think Councillor Stamoulis's motion reaffirms the importance of keeping the elected councillors abreast of the discussions, and I think the consideration that Councillor Stamoulis has asked for from the Electoral Commission. I think from the way I heard the General Manager's explanation of what is put forward, I agree with you, Councillor Byrne. They look in line. I think that's a good thing. So I think we're all working in the same direction here. I think that's a good thing. So hopefully we can support this and move on. Thank you.
may I speak, please?
Just a moment, Councillor Passis. So, Councillor Stamoulis, has the wording been amended to reflect your intention that the following be the question? No, that doesn't. No, you're trying to insist what the question is again.
No, that's incorrect. It wasn't amended.
Right. So that the following question be submitted for consideration to the Electoral Commission.
That's what I said, Mr. Mayor. Yes.
So that is, we're not going to put pressure on them to say this is the question. If they agree that what's already been put to them is a clearer or fairer question, you're not going to come back and try and subvert their advice.
Mr. Mayor, you are very angry this evening. What's your problem?
You called an extraordinary meeting for a particular purpose, and as has happened on multiple occasions now, you've moved an amendment on the floor, which is in contravention of council policy and frankly is not in keeping with the independent oversight of electoral processes.
Look, just go and have a cup of tea, Mr. Mayor. Go and have a cup of tea and settle down.
Ooh, Councillor Stamoulis firing up. Okay, so that's been incorporated into the primary motion as point 5. I'll just wait for that to occur.
Through the chair, can I just clarify one thing, if you don't mind?
Yes.
So the Electoral Commission would like, so if we put this through and they decide they want the question this week, in the next day or so, we just need to, I just need to put them and then they need to decide, and then I'll just circulate it to councillors.
Yeah, so this is a second option that's being submitted to the Electoral Commission, not a prescription from the council predetermined Electoral Commission's input.
Yeah, no problem.
Can I get a clarification, Mayor?
Yes, Councillor. No, so I've got Councillor Passis first, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Porteous.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, Councillor Passis, we can't hear you. Okay, Councillor Passis is not currently able to unmute, so I'll go to Councillor Porteous.
So we saw on the screen previously a communication from the General Manager, I believe, to the Office of Local Government regarding the actual question. My understanding is that's basically...
Mr. Mayor, I'm back again, sorry.
Approved.
I'm back again, sorry.
Do you want to go to Councillor Passis and then back to me again, or?
Sorry, Councillor Passis, I've gone to Councillor Porteous. I'll come to you when she's concluded. Councillor Porteous, please proceed.
Okay, I'm not actually speaking to the item. I'm just getting a clarification.
No, I understand.
The General Manager showed us an email which had a question on it. My understanding that question already has the tick of approval from the Office of Local Government and the New South Wales Electoral Commission. Could I just get a clarification if that is the case?
I'll put that question
Yeah,
to the
that's the
manager.
case up. Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, so the Electoral Commission came back with the feedback to say that the question seemed appropriate. They then sent it to OLG for their view, and OLG came back and confirmed that they're happy with the question.
Okay, so look, I'd like to move an amendment to Councillor Stavalos's motion, which he may want to incorporate into the primary motion because it makes more sense. Basically, they're almost the same question.
Mr. Mayor, I thought it was just a question, not
Yeah,
an amendment.
no, I'm now speaking.
Please proceed, Councillor Porteous.
Thank you. Basically, the two questions are almost identical anyway, but obviously the process that the General Manager has gone through to ensure that it's acceptable to the New South Wales Electoral Commission and to the Office of Local Government gives greater acknowledgement of that this is a very, very fair and appropriate question to be asking the community. So I think if we use that question and basically we make point 5 that council tonight adopts the question as has been approved by the Office of Local Government and the New South Wales Electoral Commission, and then we put that question as it appears in the General Manager's email.
I'll second that amendment. That's a much better, clearer, more transparent process. Councillor Passos.
Yes, look, I won't be supporting this, and I will say the question of the de-amalgamation, yes or no, is not being open and transparent with our community. I haven't had one resident tell me they want to de-amalgamate. If we're going out to the residents, they should have the for and against arguments, and the against will outweigh the for. So this is just, in my opinion, very political on everybody's part that's supporting this, not just one councillor. I'm opposed to it. It is a gross waste of ratepayers' funds. We know it's not binding. Residents are not giving the for or against to even think about it. And at this time with COVID and with the short time to the election, I think this little game that's being played is for councillors that want a platform for the re-election and for the new candidates that want a platform. I have not seen residents take to the streets. I have not seen outcries and rallies against the de-amalgamation. And if the residents knew why the council hasn't been working, unless we explain, they're not getting the full facts. I'm totally opposed to this. I signed for the extraordinary meeting because in a democracy, I believe everybody that wants to raise something or has something to add should be given the opportunity. What has happened? Are we still connected?
Sorry, I had no. My mistake. So, councillors, we're dealing with the amendment.
Excuse me, why were we cut off? What happened?
I hadn't unmuted.
So the whole thing, and
No, we heard you. Everyone heard you.
Thank you.
We're dealing with the amendment that council adopts, which reads as follows. Moved by councillor Porteous, seconded by myself. It's an amendment to point 5 to replace point 5, and it reads that council adopts the question as has been approved by the New South Wales Government and the New South Wales Electoral Commission, which is below. In May 2016, Ashfield, Leichhardt and Marrickville councils were amalgamated into one local government area by the state government. Do you support the Inner West local government area being de-amalgamated so as to restore the former local government areas of Ashfield, Leichhardt and Marrickville? Yes or no? Councillor Stamoulis, are you willing to incorporate that as the replacement for point 5?
I would like to ask one further question of the General Manager about that question.
Yes.
The question through to the General Manager, why in this question that has been designed are we mixing our terminology? What I mean here is that we say in May 2016, Ashfield, Leichhardt and Marrickville councils And then we say, do you support the Inner West local government area? Being, why couldn't we just use the term council consistently throughout that question rather than mix and match councils and local government areas? Can I have a response to that? Thank you.
I'll put that question to the General Manager.
We just tried to make the question as simple and clearer as possible. That's why so our comms team put it together simply to mirror the resolution as well. So the question that the resolution of council said take a poll of electors of whether the Inner West local government area should be de-amalgamated as to restore the former local government areas of Ashfield, Leichhardt and Marrickville. So that's what we've tried to do. We've just tried to mirror what was in there. It wasn't a question of trying to mix the language.
Okay.
But I've got our comms team. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Stamlis, you willing to incorporate the amendment?
Yes, I will. Yep.
Okay. That's incorporated as point 5. Does anyone wish to move a further amendment or to speak against the motion? If not, I'll go to Councillor Stamlis for a right of reply.
Well,
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
It's 6:30, so we'll need to open the ordinary meeting and come back to this one if you like.
I think we're almost concluded. Councillor Stamlis, do you wish to make your right of reply?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thank the officers for the work that's been done on a communication strategy. We could have avoided 20 minutes of the debate tonight had we have known that this question existed before the meeting commenced this evening, and we could have avoided 20 minutes of this meeting on that basis, and we could have avoided the time of local residents and myself in trying to design one to assist council to move forward on a question. But given that communication is still a little bit erratic, we didn't get to that point, so we had a longer debate than necessary. But I do thank you, thank the officers and the staff for the work they're doing in setting this out appropriately for our community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands and keep them raised. In support, I have Councillors De Cruz, Stamlis, Councillor Passis has absented herself, Hesse, Macri, McKenna, Kiat, Lockie, Porteous, Iskander. Councillor Steer, are you in support of the motion?
Yes, I am. Can't you see me?
No, I can't see you.
Oh.
I'm against.
And all those against, please raise your hands. Against, I have Councillors Passis, York, Rosidi.
Right.
That's it. That has been carried. I'll declare that meeting closed. I'll open the ordinary meeting. I'll commence by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. We didn't have any apologies for the extraordinary meeting, so I assume there are none for this either. I'll notify all of the participants in the public forum that these proceedings are webcast on the live onto YouTube and recorded there for posterity. So there are legal ramifications for comments that you make in the public domain. Disclosures of interest, councillors. Are there any disclosures of interest for the ordinary meeting?
Yes, this is Councillor Steer. I've got a disclosure of interest for item 28. And it's a non-significant, I think non-pecuniary. I gave advice to one of the candidates on a totally unrelated matter some time ago. So I'm just disclosing that.
Okay. Have the minute takers reported that disclosure? Thank you. I'll also make a declaration in regards to the two items that have been carried over on the agenda, which I've made declarations on previously. That is item 15 and item 7 for the same reasons as declared previously. Any other declarations, councillors?
Chair, same issue, item 15.
Thank you. Councillor Macri is also making a declaration in regards to item 15 for the same reasons recorded previously. They've now been recorded on the minutes. Councillor, will someone move the acceptance of the disclosures of interest? Moved by Councillor De Cruz. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor McKenna. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously, I presume. I'll ask everyone to join me again in a moment of quiet contemplation. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to the confirmation of minutes for the June 8 council meeting and the June 8 extraordinary meeting. Are there any amendments or clarifications? If not, will someone move the adoption of those minutes? Councillor Macri will move the adoption of the minutes. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Stamoulis will second that. I'll put that. All those in favour, against, declare that carried unanimously. We'll move on to the public forum. Can I ask the minute takers to please bring up on the screen the list of registered speakers for the public forum? The items for which we have registered speakers are items 22, notice of motion transition to electric vehicles, and item 32, Greater Sydney Parklands White Paper and Callan Park. The first speaker for item 22 is Angela Michaelis of Balmain. Angela, are you there?
Yes, I am there.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Yes, I'm listed as speaking against this motion when in fact I think that there are several good features of the motion. I should say that I'm speaking on behalf of Climate Change Balmain Roselle, but what I wanted to call for greater ambition in Council's own transition to switching to its own fleet to electric vehicles. There's some great bits in the motion, number 3, number 4, number 5, which are all about supporting the community. But I am concerned, particularly in reference to that memorandum, that that update on Council's sustainable fleet transition, which came out in August 2020, I believe it's already out of date in recommending an all-hybrid lease-back vehicle fleet. I think that the transition to EVs is happening very fast across the world, although Australia, perhaps particularly at a federal level, has been lagging. But let me give you one example from the UK. The UK's High Commissioner spoke to the Smart Energy Council a few weeks ago and talked about their new industrial revolution. Now, before Christmas, the UK government announced a 10-year timeframe to stop the sale of new petrol and diesel vehicles. And within 1 week, the major UK car firms came out and said 10 years, you're kidding, we'll be out of producing petrol and diesel vehicles within 5 years. But what they'd been looking for was a signal from government to make that announcement. And as I think I would agree with you, local government is a really important place to give a signal as well as to make real commitments. As far as hybrid vehicles, I believe that we really are moving on for them. They were a useful stepping stone to develop new technologies, But if we continue locking, if the council were to lock that in, they really become a way of just propping up the petrol fuel industry, propping up internal combustion engine vehicles. They do contribute local pollution as well as carbon emissions. We've got a clean zero emissions alternative in the electric vehicle. And even though at the moment our coal grid, our coal-fired power stations are producing far too much of our electricity, even at the moment when electric vehicles are charged from that grid, they have lower greenhouse gas emissions than internal combustion engine vehicles, and they will continue to improve as more renewables enter the grid, whereas the emission profile of hybrids is static. So I would suggest that it's very important that council is aware that they've got their own community strategic plans as government makes responsible decisions to manage finite resources in the best interests of current and future communities. I think it's great working with SSROC, but I think we need a time commitment as well. And I'd like to see that in light of that community strategic plan commitment and also the climate emergency plan, that climate emergency declaration that council made, is I'd like to see all newly leased or purchased vehicles should be.
Sorry,
just finish my sentence. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. As such, all newly leased or purchased vehicles, passenger and utility fleet vehicles, should be zero emissions vehicles as long as we can find them fit for purpose, beginning no later than the end of this financial year. So thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I didn't think this was necessary because everyone had been online before, but just to clarify, the Code of Meeting Practice allows for speakers to speak for 3 minutes. Because we're not in person tonight, normally there would be a bell or a buzzer to let you know when you get to the 2.5 minute mark, but you are able to see the clock on the screen. So I'll ask everybody to endeavour to keep to 3 minutes. Can I ask the minute takers to please bring back on the screen? Thank you very much for that. Second speaker on this motion is Anna Harvey of Croydon.
Hello, thank you for letting me speak, and thank you for the motion, in particular the parts helping the business and residential community to get access to electric vehicle chargers. Although I'm speaking to item 22, these comments are also relevant to the budget, in that the briefing note from the previous CEO has been quoted in response to the residents' submissions on electric vehicles in that document as well. Continuing to use vehicles with internal combustion engines and even hybrids causes local air pollution in our streets. It increases noise pollution and contributes to the climate emergency as declared in May 2019. These points also all apply to garden equipment. Electric vehicle fuel and maintenance costs are much lower than those of conventional vehicles. This means that the total cost of ownership over the whole lease can be the same as conventional vehicles, even with the higher initial sticker price. Climate Works, a think tank run through Monash University, found just this in a study in 2019 with councils in Victoria. Using 6-year leases and data from the 79 councils, they found that for every car model except utes, there was already an electric vehicle option that cost the same or less over the entire lease than a conventional vehicle. It is possible to have affordable electric vehicles. Conventional vehicles cause residents harm from air pollution. Asthma Australia, the Electric Vehicle Council, and Doctors for the Environment estimates 650 people die in New South Wales each year due to air pollution from vehicles. That's higher than the road toll from accidents. I'll quote from the report: kids living within 75 metres of a major road have a 29% increased risk of lifetime asthma. We often see schools built on main roads to increase accessibility, increasing exposure to asthma risk factors. People with asthma suffer more from air pollution than others because airways are particularly sensitive. Indeed, anyone with pre-existing medical conditions such as asthma, lung disease, or cardiovascular disease is more susceptible. Energy security is also much better with electric vehicles. We can generate electricity here from solar and wind, but where does our petrol and diesel come from? 90% of it comes from overseas. Our fuel prices are volatile and tied to the international market, and our refineries are getting old. Soon we'll import all of our liquid fuel. In December 2018, Australia held only 18 days of petrol, 22 days of diesel, and 23 days of jet fuel reserves, according to the federal government. In the event of disruption, emergency powers to ration fuel stocks would take up to 3 weeks to kick in. Local government play a crucial role in encouraging the uptake of electric vehicles, both in contributing to the future second-hand market and normalising the use of electric vehicles and charges for residents and business. So please electrify the fleet as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Can I ask the minute takers to bring the list of speakers back on the screen and to leave it there, please? Next speaker is Rosa Brown of Lilyfield. Rosa, are you there?
Yeah.
We can't hear you very well.
Can you hear me at all?
Yes, very slightly.
I'm not sure then what to do because I've got everything in order as I usually do. Is it possible to hear me or not?
We can hear you, just not very loudly.
Okay, I'll just try to speak then very loudly. Can you see me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right, great. Thank you very much for letting me speak tonight. My name is Rosa Brown, and I've lived in the inner west for most of my life. I'm a mother of 2 and also a school teacher. I would like to say that council should commit to more in council fleet procurement policy, and that is to choose an electric vehicle whenever there is a safe and fit for purpose option available, and regardless of the price. There are electric options available in Australia for all types of light vehicles, from small cars to big SUVs, minibuses, and small delivery vehicles. The only model not available yet is Leash. Many heavy vehicle models are also available, such as garbage trucks and super trucks. The briefing note in the agenda says that hybrids are cost neutral, but this ignores the climate impact. The Community Strategic Plan states that government makes responsible decisions to manage the finite resources in the best interest of current and future communities. In light of this and the climate emergency that was declared in May 2019, the council fleet should be electrified as soon as possible. Electric vehicles charged from the grid already have lower greenhouse emissions than conventional vehicles, and this will continue to improve as more renewables enter the grid, whereas the emissions profile of hybrids stays the same. The share of renewables on the electricity grid is rapidly increasing. In the financial year 2019, it was 21%. In financial year 2020, it was 25%. And in the past financial year, it was almost 29%. And the Australian Electricity Market Operator has said that by 2025, all mainland national electric market regions could be operating above 50% at times, and that the proportion of renewables in the grid is expected to increase further. Victorian councils have shown that it is possible to procure very affordable electricity from renewables. I hope that the Inner West Council will be able to do this as well, as is going to be discussed later tonight. This goes to show that hand-wringing over whether the council fleet will result in more emissions is not necessary because we'll be purchasing more renewable electricity. Our fleet vehicles will be sold onto the second-hand market and used for more than a decade. They will still be generating emissions after council has finished using them. So many other fleets have electric vehicles. Moreland Council in Victoria has them, as does Canterbury Bankstown City of Sydney, and the ACT government, which has 52. The New South Wales government is aiming to get 300 each year. There are many electric garbage trucks, street sweepers, super trucks, and more around the country. We need to do the right thing like all of these other councils and state governments and switch to electric vehicles whenever this is an option available. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last speaker in the public forum is for item 32, and that is Hall Greenland. Are you there, Hall?
Is that better? Can you hear me?
Yep, hear you now.
Thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of Friends of Callan Park, and we wish to thank you for this report. It's very welcome and timely. This white paper, Parklands for People, as you know, will be followed by draft legislation very soon that will try to set in concrete this new Greater Sydney Parklands and its power over Callan Park and the other parks in its portfolio. So the council, I think, is right to want to contribute, to have input into this evolving question of this Greater Sydney Parklands. The legal opinion that Council has obtained that the Callan Park Special Provisions Act takes precedence over other legislation when it comes to Callan Park is very reassuring, and the Friends thank the Council for getting that opinion. The thrust of this report against the splitting up of Callan Park is a position the Friends support. This carve-up was something that was done without informing the community or Council. Callan Park needs to be managed as one intact site, as this report makes quite clear. Our chief concern with this set of recommendations from the report before Council is that it does not clearly reaffirm Council's position that Callan Park should be managed by a Callan Park Trust. This seems to me a universal position in the community, certainly something that Labor, Liberals, Greens and Independents have supported for the best part of 20 years now, and it should definitely it would definitely strengthen the protections of Callan Park to have its own trust with strong local representation on the board. The trouble with the recommendation is it does not seem to accept that Callan Park should be managed by its own trust, and instead tends to favour the Greater Sydney Parklands board. The board of that organisation is stacked with corporates from the big end of town, handpicked by the minister. Do we really want such a board to run Callan Park? So the Friends would like the councillors to consider dropping any support for the Greater Sydney Parklands to manage Callan Park and insist once again that its governance be in the hands of a specific accountable Callan Park Trust. As for the advisory or consultative committees, which are proposed in the white paper and referred to in the recommendation, these would be entirely toothless. Their members appointed and dismissed by the GSP and without any real powers. It's not an acceptable substitute for a trust. So summing up, we welcome the opposition to the splitting up, the carving up of Callan Park, and we welcome the reassuring legal opinion, but we ask Council to reject the Greater Sydney Parklands and reiterate support for Callan Park's own trust to manage our most important and valuable regional park in the Inner West. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Hall. That brings us to the conclusion of the public forum. Councillors, are there any condolence motions tonight? No condolence motions. We'll move on to the reports. The first and most important of which is the budget. Can I just, before we move into that debate, flag to councillors that we also have a number of important items in Committee of the Whole, which officers have indicated have an important time imperative. And so I would like to just flag the notion after we've concluded with dealing with the budget of going as quickly as possible into Committee of the Whole to make sure that those urgent items are dealt with before dealing with the rest of the agenda. So we'll move on to item 1. Councillor Drury.
Mayor, I'd like to move this item in amended form, and the amendments should come up on the screen. These amendments are to have the rate harmonisation phased in over 4 years and to add a few extra points to address some of the community concerns that were raised and responded to in the consultation phase. Firstly, I'd like to highlight that this budget delivers to residents a very significant decrease, or most residents, a very significant decrease in the amount they'll pay for domestic waste. For example, in Dulwich Hill, the old Marrickville local government area, residents will save $114 per annum, and if they take a smaller bin, they could save more. This saving has come about through the hard work at refining the way domestic waste is collected by our staff. We're working smarter. It also comes about because we're going to subsidise from our reserves as we align domestic waste charge to our new resource recovery strategy. This is a really important step for our council as we address one of the major environmental challenges of our time. As we work out how to deal with waste, as we work out how to move from dealing with waste to how we can recover and reuse resources. This is an example of the Inner West at its best, addressing a major environmental issue, using our reserves to transition our community and helping the offset of the impacts of the Great Harmonisation. I hear some councillors say the Inner West Council is a financial mess. When I hear this, sometimes I wonder if they're looking at different figures than I am. Sure, we've got our challenges, but as we've done with the domestic waste charge, we can find ways of being financially responsible as well as being environmentally and socially responsible. I'd like to acknowledge that we have a budget which will have a just under a $4.4 million operating deficit. But I think this needs to be considered in the context of an overall operational budget of $245 million. Importantly, we've decided to continue to allocate 100% of the funds needed to renew our assets as we need to. This is an area that some other councils scrimp on and they end up in a mess. We have very close to $2 billion in assets that our community owns and our council manages. In terms of the capital budget, we've got a wonderful $90 million budget that will give us significant improvements to Parramatta Road, keep the Greenway moving, provide for 2 significant bike paths, upgrade a good number of our significant parks, renew over $5 million in local roads and spend over $5 million on our town centres. I'm very pleased that this budget has provision for over $3 million to be spent on planting trees in public land. I'd like us to establish a new baseline for tree planting of $2 million per annum after this. We all know the significant temperature and oxygen benefits of trees.
Just a moment, Councillor Drury, just a moment. I'll move an extension of time of 2 minutes for Councillor Drury. Is there a seconder for that?
May I speak next? Thank you.
Yes, you can. And Councillor Passos will also second the motion for the extension of time. All those in favour, against, declare that carried. Please proceed.
So I'm really pleased about the $3 million. I want to see us establish a new baseline going forward. We all know the significant importance of planting trees in public land and where we can plant them and where we need to properly maintain them. This is another example of the Inner West Council doing what is best. Let me come to the question of harmonisation of rates. Firstly, we know we are being forced to do this by the state government. Secondly, we all know that rates are based on the unimproved value of land and that land in the Inner West keeps rising in value to an extent that has become a major social problem. I understand there are some who think that rates should be harmonised over 8 years rather than 4 years. I don't think this is a sensible timetable to do this. I think what we do need to do is move to an equitable rating structure that evenly distributes rates across the Inner West Council. I think we need to do it in a way that is sensitive to those who will need to pay more and hence a 4-year process. I think a process that is longer than that risks us failing to move to that even distribution across the area in a way in a timely fashion. When we think about it, 8 years is a very long time. 8 years is longer than 2 councils worth. I think that that doing it over such a long time, when there'll be great turnover of staff, councillors, etc., I think probably leads to some instability in terms of the way we move forward. Councillors, I would like us tonight to adopt the revised delivery program, the operational plan, the fees and charges, the long-term plan, the general rates policies, to increase the COVID stimulus and to note the additional money that we are budgeted for planting new trees, and also commit in future to an annual spend of no less than $2 million. I commend the motion to councillors.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Drury. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor McKenna will second the motion. Do you wish to speak to it? She's withholding her right to speak. Councillor Passos?
Yes, first of all, I'd like to raise the issue. I don't believe the rate harmonisation we should be voting on it together with the budget. They're separate issues, and I would like them to be separated, and I would like them to be voted on separate. Can you tell me why they are together, given that the rate harmonisation does not add 1 cent to our budget? Can I have an answer through you, Mr. Mayor?
I'll put that question to the General Manager.
Yeah, thanks. Through the chair. The rates, council adopt the rates policy with every budget. So every council that's doing the harmonisation, it's part of it. So all rates, it doesn't matter whether they increased overall revenue or not, the rates policy of council, which is this, is exhibited and packaged up with the budget for all councils.
But this is completely different. This is a harmonisation. Some will pay more, some will pay less.
Councillor Passos, I think the question's been answered. I think all councils always adopt their rates structure along with their budget because the two things are interlinked.
You're right, but there's no harmonisation. This is a different issue.
Well, if
there's
you'd
not
like
too many that have harmonisation when they're adopting their budget.
Well, would you like to? It's possible to deal with the concern that you have either through an amendment or a foreshadowed motion.
I'd like to move in a foreshadowed motion that we deal with them separately.
Well, that's not a foreshadowed motion. That's a procedure.
Well, an amendment. Well, whatever you want to call it, you know where I'm going.
But what is it that you'd like to vote on separately?
The budget and then the rate harmonisation.
Well, have a look at the points on the screen. Which of those would you like to be separated out?
A and B.
Point 2, I think it is clear.
Point 2, you'd like to vote on separately. Is that right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, well, we can do that. We'll separate those out. Councillor Drury and Councillor McKenna are the movers of that motion. So are you speaking to that component of the primary motion? Are you proposing an alternate?
No, I'm that's where I had the concern, and with and also I do believe that this budget is very it's very large, and I have a lot of concerns, and I don't think we've really scrutinised it properly. I don't think we've had. I spoke to the General Manager today. He was willing for me. He was willing.
If you've commenced speaking
to him.
Yeah. Sorry, that's okay.
There's just too much to do on the phone. I would like to defer this for a couple of weeks. I don't know how COVID's going to pan out, but I really do need more information because there is a lot in that budget that I just cannot understand. And then when you say the rate harmonisation, we were forced to do it. Those words are pretty strong. You don't feed one child and not the other. It had to happen. You cannot have different race system in one council. So the words forced are pretty strong and really do not apply. And I would want my residents to get rate relief as soon as possible. And I don't think 4 years is right that they have to wait, given how long Ashfield residents have been paying such a high rate.
Okay. I'll just seek clarification, Councillor Passos. You're proposing that are you proposing that the point 2 be deferred?
No, I would like the rate harmonisation and the budget be voted on separately.
No, we've
and
agreed
I would like the budget to be deferred, but I know the numbers, and we've just heard a lot of promises that we're going to do with trees, with this, with that.
Passos, you've spoken to it already. I was just seeking clarification.
Can I have an extension?
Well, you'd concluded your comments.
No, I didn't conclude. You afforded the councillor before me 2 minutes.
Well, you don't need an extension. You've got a minute and a half to go. I thought you'd concluded your remarks.
No, well, a minute and a half and 2 minutes. I'd like 3.5 minutes then, if that's the case.
Well, let's do the first minute and a half, and I'm sure people will be clamouring for more.
Okay. Maybe I'm not clear. I would like the 2 issues separated so they can be voted on. I don't think my residents should have to wait 4.5 years.
We've agreed to separate the 2 issues.
Thank you very much. Now, the budget, I have concerns with a lot of it, and I need to sit down and talk to the appropriate officers for it to be explained. The General Manager did say I could ring him today, but I don't believe that he should have to take responsibility of every department. He would have to be the biggest whiz kid if he could answer every question. So to defer it for a week or 2 weeks, if councillors are of the mind, with what's been going on and how busy people are, I'm pretty sure no one had a chance to really scrutinise this budget. And the budget is serious. Maybe we can send our questions in, but I'm asking for a deferment week or 2 and this whole issue separated. Thank you.
So I'm sorry to be pedantic, Councillor Passos, but just to clarify, it's been agreed that point 2 could be voted on separately. And are you proposing a foreshadowed motion that the rates harmonisation be implemented immediately? Sorry, we can't hear you.
Yes, and the budget be deferred for a week so more questions can be sent into council to the officers.
Okay, got that. Okay, so Councillor Passos has moved an amendment to point 2 that the rates harmonisation, and separate to that, she's moved an amendment to point 2 that the rates harmonised structure be adopted immediately, and for deferral of the budget, the rest of the budget consideration. So we'll deal with
point of order, Mayor. Is it a amendment or is it a foreshadowed motion? Because it seems quite different to the intention of the original.
Oh, well, it must be foreshadowed.
Okay. All right. I think that's right. So it's a foreshadowed motion from Councillor Passos for deferral of the budget and for the immediate implementation of the rates of the new rate structure. I'm going to go to the General Manager to seek clarification about what statutory obligations are required of Council in terms of the adoption of the budget.
Thanks, through the Chair. Yeah, the budget needs to be, and the operational plan needs to be adopted before the beginning of each financial year. So we have to adopt it by tomorrow. And I just like
Government Act, is it?
Yep, that's right. So it needs to be adopted. I've checked that with our legal officer, our General Counsel, and the budget itself is largely been the following year of the long-term financial plan that was adopted last year. So there's no massive changes in respect to where our funds have gone to.
Okay. Well, based on the advice of the General Counsel and the General Manager that it's not in accordance with the Local Government Act to defer the budget.
I'm sorry, I challenge that advice. I challenge it 100%.
Yeah. Well,
I challenge that, and I want that recorded that I challenge that advice.
Been recorded on YouTube, but nonetheless, as I'm required to only allow motions that are in accordance with the Local Government Act, and we've received legal advice that that is not in accordance with the Local Government Act, the foreshadowed motion will need to delete point 2. So that means we've got a foreshadowed motion from Councillor Passis that the rates harmonisation structure be adopted immediately. And we've got the primary motion, which stands from Councillor Drury and Councillor McKenna. Now, I'll go to further discussion from councillors.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Stamoulis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. These aren't rosy times for council, and certainly not for our residents. We're in difficult circumstances financially. That's compounded by the fact that COVID has been present for the last 16 months, affecting both council and our businesses. These are difficult times. They are stress times, and they're certainly not rosy as some councillors might want to make them out to be. Then overlay that with rates harmonisation. We are lifting the minimum rates for 41% of our dwellings. That's not a rosy picture for those who live in units and flats throughout our community. 41% see their minimum rates lifted. That's not rosy times at all, and it's difficult during a COVID scenario for people to meet their housing costs. It's difficult when some of those are facing are the dwellings which are the more affordable dwellings. So it's difficult when we're imposing those increases on. We also find that as we go through the long-term financial plan, we are increasing our expenditure. We increase our expenditure. In fact, I'm looking at the long-term financial plan from anywhere from about 250 million to 290 million. Now, residents may think that's fantastic that we're increasing our spending over that period of 10 years. 90% of it is taken up by staff costs. 90% of the increased expenditure is on staff costs. So we are not providing more in services and outcomes to our residents. So these are the things that I think this is a very difficult budget. It's handing out big increases. And then, of course, minimum rates, we've lifted 41% of our dwellings. And then, of course, we've got the whole entire LGA of Marrickville, where rates will be lifted. And I know the Marrickville councillors and Stanmore councillors are very concerned about that. So that 41% increases then by a very significant amount. So this is not a rosy budget at all. It is a difficult one for council. It's a difficult one for our residents. Now, I would like to then finally pose a question. We are adopting the budget tonight, but 2 scenarios have been provided. So I'd ask through the chair to the general manager, which of those 2 scenarios is it that we will be adopting this evening? Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'll put the question to the general manager.
Thanks through the chair. I'm just not 100% sure of the question because we're adopting a scenario with a harmonisation of rates. So I think the resolution's clear as far as I know, but I'm happy to seek some clarification from Councillor Stamoulis.
Councillor Stamoulis, which scenarios are you referring to?
On public exhibition, there were 2 scenarios, 1 and 2. Sorry.
Yeah, so I'll clarify that then. Yeah, so we're adopting, well, what's been moved here, the officers recommended that we adopt no harmonisation immediately. The resolution that we have before us, it says we harmonise over 4 years.
Right, okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. I've got Councillor Hesse.
And De Cruz.
Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Byrne. I appreciate the call. I wish to move a very, very brief amendment to Councillor Drury and Councillor McKenna's motion. That is on point 2. That is adopt a rating structure to harmonise the rates, blah, blah, blah. It's just disappeared in front of me, that the amendment be moved. And thank you, Catherine, for putting it up on the screen, that we go from 4 years to 8 years. And I will speak to that
Please proceed.
Sorry, Councillor Byrne.
I said, yeah, please proceed.
Thank you. Look, I appreciate what Councillor Drury said in his remarks, but some people have said jokingly that if we wanted to put the case forefront into people's minds for de-amalgamation, then we would indeed adopt introducing the new rate structure immediately. I certainly don't hold that view. I think this is a significant increase as a direct result of the amalgamation. And while we Greens very clearly, as we've already moved, had moved earlier this year to seek a deferral until an opportunity arose for residents to vote on that matter, nonetheless, that wasn't agreed to by the majority. We abide by the majority clearly. Nonetheless, I think 8 years, as is allowed for under state legislation, is the appropriate way to go. It also gives an opportunity for not too many eggs to be broken if indeed residents decide that they do wish to de-amalgamate. So that's the crux of it. I think that is the fairest way to go. It's slow but steady. We don't want to shock residents. We want to be mild and moderate. And certainly on that basis, I know most, if not all of my Greens colleagues will proceed forward with the work of that. To speak more generally to the motion, I do thank the staff for the hard work in putting this document together. It is a lot of work. I will restate publicly what I've stated privately, that, and indeed I think I've stated it publicly and privately every year for the last 4 years, that I don't believe that the way that the budget has been put together by Inner West Council has been appropriate. I don't think it engages with council as well enough. I know the General Manager, who is just on board, understands my view, and I do hope that there'll be a much more engaged councillor group in the new council, no matter how long it lasts, to engage around this issue. I think it's a better thing to engage councillors more significantly on behalf of our community. That's fundamentally important. So with those words said, I do think that we can go forward, and I hope that councillors will support my amendment of the rates harmonisation over 8 years. Thank you.
Okay. In keeping with our improved practice, or my improved practice of late, we're now going to stick to the Code of Meeting Practice and deal with the HESI amendment. So just to be clear, because I think there's broad consensus about adopting a budget tonight, one of the issues of contention at least is about the rates harmonisation and when it would be implemented. So we've now got a primary motion to harmonise it over 4 years, a foreshadowed motion to harmonise it immediately, and an amendment to the primary motion to extend the 4 years to 8 years. So that's the amendment that we will now debate. Is there a seconder for the HESI amendment?
Yes, I'll second.
Councillor De Cruz, please proceed.
De Cruz will second.
Yep.
Yeah, look, I'm seconding this motion for...
Sorry, Councillor De Cruz, your reception's not real good at the moment. You can, but your reception's not real good. So
I think it's your reception, I think.
Okay. Can anyone else? Is anyone else looking at a bit of?
No, it's definitely you, Councillor De Cruz. Sorry.
No, I think that's you, Margarita.
Hard to believe that I could be wrong about something like that, but there you go, Councillor De Cruz. I'm right about that.
Okay. Is that any better?
No.
Not legible. Not hearable. Audible.
Okay, how about that?
Not audible.
Audible.
You wrote it out.
It's a headset. So, look, I'll second this motion, and I've got a further amendment later on. But basically, Councillor Drury's already mentioned that the domestic waste charge is being harmonised, but that's over 7 years, and therefore I think that it's appropriate that the rates are harmonised in sync and closer to the harmonisation of the domestic waste rate. So hence I'm talking 8 years. And I think in reality, While I understand Councillor Pass's keen to have people's rates drop, there are a lot of people whose rates are going up. And of course, it's much harder to go with a sudden shock of having increased costs rather than reduced costs. So for that reason, I'm supporting this amendment. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Just you might want to log out and log back in, Councillor De Cruz, because it was difficult to hear through all of that. Further speakers to the Hesse De Cruz amendment?
Councillor McKenna, can I speak against it, please?
Yes, Councillor McKenna.
Look, the timing on this is really poor. An 8-year harmonisation will take it over 4 council terms. That is just too long. That's, of course, counting this term, because there's going to be 2 months of this term and then 2 whole terms, and then we'll go into a 4th term before these rates are harmonised. Assuming that this council stays together and the Inner West Council continues, it needs to be harmonised. Probably I would have suggested 3 years so that it's done by the end of the next term, but that's not the case. It's been suggested 4 years, and the 4-year term will still take us into the 3rd council before it's actually resolved and harmonised. I do think you're asking a lot of the people who are going to be supporting this change and not getting their rates reduced in a timely fashion. I think the 4-year is somewhere in between, and I think that's where we should land, not 8 years. It's just too long, and it's asking too much of those people whose rates would have been reduced, having to wait that long to have their justice. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McKenna. Further speakers to the amendment?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councillor Stamoulis.
Mr. Mayor, the issue with the length of time is that we're now
Sorry, may I speak next?
Yeah, well, yes, yep.
The issue is that we're now into our 6th year of the merger. If we move down the lines of 4 years, that'll mean 10 years later, 10 years after the merger, the Inner West rates will be harmonised. If we move to the 8-year scenario, it would have taken 14 years to harmonise our rates across the municipality since the merger. So therefore, I've got a question through to the General Manager. I appreciate it could be a difficult question. How long have some of the other councils taken to, or will take, to achieve this merger, given that ours could now take between 10 and 14 years? We have a number of other merged councils near us. Do we have any feel for when they might have achieved that? Thank you.
Put that question to the General Manager.
Thanks, through the chair. Some have gone straight away. Some have gone 4 years that I'm aware of. I don't know, Peter Lavanis, mate, I don't know if there's another one that's gone 8 years, but I know that there's been a mixture.
So I'm assuming, through the chair, I'm assuming that 14 years would be quite long in the normal scheme of things.
Well, just to clarify, it won't be, whilst you can interpret it at 14 years, but the discussion of people harmonising their rates, they haven't had the opportunity to do it yet. So some councils are doing it immediately, some are doing 4, and I think there may be even a council that's gone over 8.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Further discussion of the amendment, Councillor Passos? Yep.
Look, I cannot support 8 years. It has to be done immediately. The issue we had earlier on the agenda, and I find it very surprising with the Greens, we're talking about electric vehicles. They're very, very expensive, and we want electric vehicles. If the Marrickville people, which I feel for, and part of them are in my ward, cannot afford that extra of the rate, which they've had a pretty good trot for a fair few years, how in hell are they going to buy electric vehicles? This is fair. This is right. We must do it immediately, or we should not be operating. We are one council. We're supposed to deliver the same services. Why should one area pay more than the others? God forbid, we're all racing out to buy electric vehicles. We just spent an hour on that issue, but a couple of $100 a year. Yes, we'll have to address it. They'll have to address it. I'm sorry, the way Ashfield residents have had to address it for years. This must be done immediately, and we should be voting on the budget and this separately. And I would like the budget to be deferred for a week.
Okay, further discussion on the amendment?
Chair. Yes, I'd like to speak.
Councillor Porteous, then Councillor Macri.
Thank you. Look, I think when you actually feel the impact of an increase of rates is when you are going to get an increase in the rates. It's quite different if you're going to get a decrease in the rates. Let's be honest, the status quo at the moment is what it is. Ashfield, yes, pays more rates than, say, many people in Marrickville and some people in Leichhardt proportionally. But that's a long-term situation for Ashfield Council, just like they would never have been able to build their pool without the fact that they were able to benefit from two better functioning councils financially in Leichhardt and Marrickville, which basically have had to subsidise the pool for Ashfield. I mean, there's, and the list could go on. They now have their verges mode, and they didn't have their verges mode previously. I mean, but the fact is that where it really stings, where it really hurts, is when you're going to have to pay more than you were paying before. And the point of actually having the longer period of time to, in inverted commas, harmonise, because there's nothing harmonious about this, is the benefit of that is going to those people that in fact are going to have a larger rates bill to pay than they had previously. And surely that's a good thing. Surely you would want to be voting to ensure that people that are going to have to pay more will have to pay more over the longest period of time possible, so that they have the greatest opportunity to adapt to that. I mean, personally, I'm against this rate harmonisation. I think that the three rate systems should remain as they are. Status quo, basically, no changes. But if you're going to have changes because it's legislated that way and there are no other options, at least let's make it the least damaging possible. The least damaging possible is clearly the longest possible period to change the system. And that if we have the option of 8 years, why on earth would we opt for 4 or less? It makes no sense. You obviously, the logical thing to do is opt for the longest period possible in order to have the least impacts on those that in fact are going to, at the end of the day, have the greatest impact. It should be a no-brainer for most of the councillors.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Macri?
Yeah, Chair. There's come to no surprise as a Marrickville Ward councillor. For the actual residents, they'll get maybe $100, maybe $200, but for the actual shops, the struggling businesses at the moment, it's going to be $600, $700, $800, and that right at this time is just not a good outcome, particularly in COVID. And there's no way I could support this going through if the government's given me an option to actually soften the blow. And the other councils will get their benefit. They will get a benefit. It'll just take a little bit longer to get there. And as has been said, Ashfield residents have enjoyed increased levels of services. So I don't think they should be too aggrieved with that. But I just think the impact is just really terrible timing in the middle of COVID now. That's all I'll say. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Further discussion?
Mayor, may I speak to the amendment?
Yes.
Look, what we have been asked to do is distribute the rate burden across the Inner West Council area. That is in effect what rate harmonisation is about. And let me be clear to anyone listening, this is not about council receiving 1 extra cent. This is simply about the total rate benefit and how we distribute it. I agree with the point made by Councillor Porteous that we all notice things going up and we all feel that a lot more than we might things going down. However, we do need to move to an equitable rate structure in a timely fashion. I disagree with Councillor Passis that we should do it immediately. I think we should have some transition. I think that we should have a transition of 4 years, which would be a reasonable time for people to know what will happen to their rates, to make appropriate decisions, and for the benefit, for the burden of the rates to actually go across the area that we are currently administering. Now, I know there are some people who believe we should have 3 separate councils. That is an issue that is going out to the people, and let the people decide. We are here at the moment to look after the best interests of the whole of the Inner West. And I would urge councillors to consider what is in the best interests of the whole Inner West. And I think that is moving to a fair and equitable distribution of a rate burden, given in a timely fashion that gives some relief to those who will need to pay more. I'd urge people to vote against this amendment.
Okay, any further discussion on the amendment, councillors? If not, I'll go to Councillor Hesse for a right of reply.
Councillor Byrne, look, thank you. I do appreciate the conversation that other councillors put forward, but I do believe in fairness that as Councillor Macri said, the impact of an immediate or even a 4-year rise of this magnitude will be particularly tricky, I appreciate, for business people, but not less, of course, residents generally. And I think it affects not only residents in Marrickville, but also a chunk in the former Leichhardt as well. I appreciate the situation in Ashfield, but I guess they've budgeted, residents there have budgeted for that. I do think at this time it is a pretty tricky one. So look, I do hope that everyone will support the 8 years. Otherwise, because I think otherwise we have there a good way to go forward. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I'll put the Hesse de Cruz amendment. All those in favour, please raise your hands and keep them raised. In support, I have councillors de Cruz, Stamoulis, Hesse, Macri, Kiat, Lockie, Porteous, Iskander, Steer. Councillor Rosidi, are you there? Yep. Councillor Rosidi is there, but against the amendment. All those against, please raise your hands and keep them raised. Against, we have councillors Passis, York, McKenna, Drury, Rossetti, and myself. That amendment has been carried and is incorporated into the primary motion.
Did Councillor Lockie vote?
Yes, she was in favour of the amendment. So that
amendment.
Scusi?
I have a further amendment. Councillor De Cruz.
Councillor De Cruz has a further amendment.
Which I'm hoping Catherine can put up on the screen. It's basically noting the 30 submissions from the community, and in particular, the ones discussing the quicker transition to electric vehicles, as was raised by the officers, by the community speakers today, and the ones relating to climate change. So I suppose in general, I'd like to thank
I accept the amendment.
The amendment is accepted. Sorry, Councillor Bruce. Please.
Terminated. I got set up and couldn't speak. Okay.
Okay, that's been accepted into the primary motion. Are there any further amendments?
Chair.
Councillor Kiat.
Yeah, there are. Yep. So I've circulated some amendments earlier tonight. They relate to three areas: to cycling, to pool fees, and to childcare fees. I won't speak to the substantive motion. I think that area has been well covered by Councillors Drury and Hesse. But I do want to thank the staff for the updated report, and in particular, congratulate the staff on finding further savings and doing the very difficult work in relation to the harmonisation and the domestic waste management charge subsidy. So thank you for that. Look, I'll try and speak to the amendments quickly. Perhaps I'll go to the pools first. It's something that I've raised before. Councillors will be aware that there's strong support in the community for harmonising the existing pensioner concession rate that exists at LPAC, which is now $1.20. It used to be $1. And I'll just note that I intend this to cover all pensioners, including job seekers, disability support pension. If the staff think I need to include that in the wording, I can do that. This has very strong support in the community, and we know it's needed. We as a council have actually consistently supported the Raise the Rate campaign, the campaign that calls on the federal government to raise the rate of what's now called job seeker. And I think it's notable in this context that ACOS's Raise the Rate campaign has actually seen this proposal in the community to introduce this $1 pensioner concession rate, and they've actually supported that and called on their supporters to lobby council to support this. So I think we should really deliver for those in our community who are struggling, who can't afford an $8 pool entry fee if they need to escape the heat this summer. And knowing that our pools are such an important asset for our community, let's make them more accessible. I think that it's also, we know that people travel across the LGA to go to LPAC to access this concession rate. And I just think it's not reasonable. We've got a great suite of aquatic centres. We shouldn't have pensioners from Newtown and pensioners from Ashfield travelling all the way to LPAC when they've got pools in their own areas that should have the same concession rate available. Well, I've almost used all my time speaking to that point. I'll try and speak briefly to the cycling amendments now.
Councillor Cat, you don't need to. It's perfectly legitimate for you to have spoken to that amendment and for us to, in fact, it would be proper for us to debate that amendment prior to going on to further amendments. So with your concurrence, I'll ask if there's a seconder for the amendment.
No problem. Councillor Hesse.
Councillor Hesse will second the amendment. Can I just ask a question of you, Councillor Kiat, first before going to Councillor Hesse? What is the budgeted cost of the harmonisation of the pensioner rate for pool entry?
Councillor Byrne, you might recall that we actually asked council officers to provide us with advice on that question.
Yeah.
I think that was in May or even April. I haven't had an answer to that. I did follow up this week. So my apologies to Mr. Duck if he does have an answer to that question, but I don't. But I'm not sure that there is an answer to that question. I think that I would just say in relation to that question, it's hard to say because we don't know how much it will increase the usage of our pools. So, yeah, but
yeah, no, I understand. Well, just in that context, then, can I just put a question to the officers about what assessment has been made and whether there's a report pending on this as per the council resolution?
Thank you. Through the chair, I might throw that to Simon if he's there.
I'll put that question to. Yep, please proceed.
Yep. Thank you. Through the chair, we have done some initial review of that motion as well as some other items that we've been working on. I can confirm that initial estimations put the cost of increasing the $1 or the $1 pensioner concession rate to an unbudgeted cost of somewhere in the vicinity of $100,000.
$100,000 per annum.
Yep.
And is there a report pending on that as per the council resolution?
Yes, there's a report pending.
When is that report due to be tabled at council?
We can table it as soon as possible. Should that be the wish of the council to bring that one on its own to council?
And I'll just ask of the General Manager, would the amended charge be able to be adopted once the report has been tabled, despite the fact that it's after the budget being adopted?
Yeah, we'd have to do it as part of the Q1 adjustment to financial impact. The amended charge. I'll just hang on 2 seconds. I'll just got to check something.
Okay, we'll take that on notice momentarily. Councillor Hesse, do you wish to speak to the amendment?
Just as very briefly, Councillor Byrne, I've suggested to Catherine, and if Councillor Kidd agrees, that we amend that to, rather than the pensioner concession rate, that it be social security recipient rate. I think that makes it very clear the intention. Look, I would be very interested to see the methodology behind the officer's report on that. I think, as we've discussed before in the briefings, I think the feeling that many of us have is that people, particularly on unemployment benefit, are not attending the pools because they simply can't afford it. And the $1.20 that they might contribute would actually be an increase in revenue because, quite frankly, they're paying nothing now because they're not going. So I think the methodology there would be very interesting to really just amplify. I think, as I said, having friends who've suffered unemployment in recent times, people my age, it is a brutal experience in our society. And attending a pool is a very easy and proper and decent thing that we can do to people in distressing times. It's good for their mental health. It gets them out and gets them exercise. So yeah, I think this is an absolutely really important thing to do. That's enough for me. Thank you.
Thanks. Can I just ask a further question of the officers about whether it would have any contractual impacts on council's contracts with Belgravia in regards to the changing of the pensioner fee?
Through the chair, should there be a change to the pensioner price point for the Annette Kellerman and Fanny Durack Aquatics centres, it would trigger a potential claim for a reimbursement for those visits. Again, the estimated impact would be based on past historical visits rather than undetermined new visits that we wouldn't be able to assess. But the $100,000 impact that I've projected so far is based on current attendances or historical attendances that we know of, and it's spread across the Annette Kellerman and the Ashfield areas, of course, because the price point is already in place at the Leichhardt Aquatic Centre.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll just speak very
May I speak
briefly
on this after you, Mr. Mayor?
Yep, no problem. I'll just speak very briefly against the amendment, and I say that regretfully because I think the intention of this is good, and I think the outcome that Councillor Kiat is seeking to achieve is something that I can support, especially given it's something that we'd adopted over a long period of time at Leichhardt. But given we've got a report coming that will include information on what the cost will be and what the contractual implications will be on council in regards to Belgravia, the provider of the former Marrickville pools, that it would be wise and sensible for us to get that report, as we've already resolved to do, before making the change to the fee. Given that we've received advice from, I just want to seek clarification from the General Manager, but it would certainly be my view that there would be no legal impediment to implementing that change once we have received the report. It doesn't need to be adopted tonight. I'll vote against that amendment, but I want to clarify for the record that I would like to see the report come and would like to see the change, if it can be implemented, to happen as well. Further discussion on the amendment.
Yes, may I speak?
Yes, Councillor Passos.
Through you to the appropriate officer, before I can vote on this, there are increases in the budget for the pool. Wouldn't that help if we voted for this amendment? The revenue is raising at the pool, and I think gym fees too. I've had a few calls from residents that it's been touted that the gym fees are going up, and the fees to the pool are rising.
Sorry, can I just ask what the question is, Councillor Passos?
Well, if we gave this to the pensioners and the social security recipients, we wouldn't be losing out. We're raising the pool costs for entry and for gyms and whatever. So we wouldn't be losing out, and we'd be helping the most vulnerable.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It would be more fair.
Yeah, I think I'd have to take that as a statement, because I don't think there's a question to the
It's not a statement. I need to. I think, weren't we just told we'd be out of pocket about $100,000? Well, how much are we going to, what is the revenue we're going to raise with these proposed increases?
Okay, well, I'll ask the officers just to outline what fees are proposed for increase and whether that has already been incorporated into the proposed budget.
Yep, through the chair. So the annual gazetted fees and charges increases that the council would apply every year is what would commence in the coming financial year. Of course, our various expenses that apply to the different costs for those centres also are made up of part of that. So in respect to the cost analysis for introducing a reduced fee, the estimated cost is done in isolation, and it's just done simply on the number of visits that we've had historically and applying a $1 entry fee to those visits. There could be assumptions made that it may generate additional visits and therefore generate additional income. It's hard to sort of guess at that because we don't have any hard data to look at. So the cost that is approximated is simply just a historical attendance to a new fee. But certainly we could agree on some assumptions around generating some new attendance. I would have to work with the finance team to work out what might be fair in that case.
But I was also asking about the increases we're proposing in the budget.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that
we get an outline? Could we get an outline of any fee increases proposed in the budget in regards to aquatic centres?
Through the chair, so the fees increase proposed in the budget are those that are listed in the fees and charges.
Yeah, we've got any idea how much it's going, what income it's going to generate?
I would, through the chair, I'd have to take that on note to come back with an estimation on those additional incomes.
So we don't know how much the additional income is, but we've got it in the budget.
Well, Councillor Passos, you're in possession of the budget, so if you'd like to ask a specific question about the fees that are listed, if you could reference the page, that would be great.
No, it's all the fee charges are going up. So we're putting them up, but we have no idea how much it's going to generate.
I don't think that's
through the chair.
Yeah, sorry.
We can determine some information. I just don't have that information available at hand.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Further discussion of the amendment?
Yeah.
Councillor Porteous.
Yeah, look, this is such an easy proposal to vote for, and I'm very proud of the fact that this was something that the Greens brought in.
Oh, please,
Council.
Call the meeting to order. Councillor Passos, I'll ask you to assist.
And I'm happy that Councillor Byrne supported this proposal when it was brought forward to Leichhardt Council. It's been immensely popular, and so many people, mention it to you right from all over Sydney because they very much appreciate the fact that we've done that. And the point is, I think this point was made previously, is that in actual fact, we've got more people coming to Leichhardt Aquatics Centre because we have this pensioner / social security recipient concession than we would otherwise have. And I think the same would happen, for example, at Ashfield if this was introduced at Ashfield. And you've got to ask, why wouldn't you? I mean, here we are in the middle of an appalling lockdown for coronavirus. We have an enormous number of people in our local communities which are, facing real challenges, both in terms of economic challenges and in terms of mental and physical health. Being able to go to the pool and have a swim is a wonderful relief for people. And why wouldn't we make it more accessible to more people who are most probably people that are going to benefit most from being able to do that? That's what we are meant to do. We are building public assets for public benefit. Surely when we've got the opportunity to extend that public benefit to more people, and particularly more people who will very much benefit, and it's going to be a win-win because in all likelihood our income will actually increase by doing it, why wouldn't we do it? The Mayor says wait until we get a report, but the fact is we can do it and we can do it now. And if we can do it and we can do it now, why wouldn't we do it now? Why wouldn't we start the benefit now? Waiting another couple of months really doesn't make more sense because it's very clear that this is a win-win situation, and that we are going to be able to extend that to our other pools, which would undoubtedly be something which a lot of people are going to appreciate in the local community. So let's do it. Let's just get on with it and let's do it.
Mayor.
Just a moment, Councillor Drury. Councillor Porteous, just for clarification, I don't think it's fair to attribute personal blame to me. I've just said that I support the measure, but I wanted to see the report that the officers are due to produce. And I do note that the Greens voted against the funding for the refurbishment of Leichhardt Pool that those pensioners actually use the facilities for. So,
point of order.
Let's not get into a blame game.
Against the refurbishment.
Councillor,
well, you voted against the
if
rating.
you want to get into it,
You voted against the rate increase.
I acknowledge the fact that you voted for this concession when it was introduced into Leichhardt.
I'll call the meeting to order. I'll go to Councillor Drury. Councillor Drury has the floor.
I didn't know you were that sensitive, Councillor.
Councillor Drury.
I'll tread more carefully around you next time.
Councillor Drury has the floor.
Mayor, I accept all of the amendments put forward by Councillor Keat. I accept the amendment
very
in
kind of you,
relation.
Councillor Drury.
I accept the amendment in relation to the pools. I accept the amendment in relation to childcare and the amendments in relation to cycling.
I haven't even read the amendment in relation to childcare as yet. So could I just ask that the minute takers to at least display all of the amendments on the screen at once? We're debating the pools amendment currently. Councillor Drury has indicated, sorry, I'm sure there's okay. So there's actually 6 amendments. So there's a cycling amendment, which has 4 clauses. There's a pools amendment, which we're now debating, because I understood that was the first amendment, and then there's a childcare amendment. So I'll go to...
Mayor, can we vote on them separately, please?
We are voting on them separately.
Thank you.
So we're dealing with the pools amendment, which Councillor Drury has now indicated will be incorporated into the primary motion. So there's no need for debate on that, unless any councillor... No, there's no need for any further debate on that.
Chair.
Yeah, Councillor Macri.
Chair, just on the rebate stuff, and I really get entertained at budget times where councillors come up with all these wonderful ideas about giving things away for nothing, and then they go onto Facebook and they pat themselves on the back and think of what a wonderful job they've done. I think it's pretty simple, and I find it a real concern, because you're giving away the ratepayers' money, number one, and you have to be responsible for that. When the council is deficit, you have to look at ways where you can actually ensure that council stays viable. Not just you're not giving your money away. You're giving the ratepayers' money away. So don't go out there on Facebook and say, oh, I've done this and I've done that and I've got 15% affordable housing in and all that. That's really annoying, and it's political rhetoric, because we're not giving anything away, right? We're giving the people's money away. So just be aware of that. I don't mind supporting this in the way that we get the report, as you stated. I would like to really get the report, and I'll support helping people, and that's what we should do. But I just think it's too simplistic. And when we actually just say we're going to give this away, we're going to give that away, and then we go back to it and say, listen, we've got no money to cut your verges, we've got no money to fix the potholes in your streets, we've got no money to maintain the pools, they're collapsing, we've got to go for a special rate variation because of this and because of that. I just think we've got to be a little bit more genuine in what we do, because quite easy, I could just say, let's actually just give everything away for nothing. You know, I'd like a question through to the manager of Aquatics, or the acting manager of Simon Duck. I can't remember his official title now. He's changed that many times. A question through to him. Do we keep records of what people, where they come from using our pools? Do we take a postcode record? I go into Hobbycar and they take down my postcode so they know where their clients are coming from. Do we track that sort of data?
I'll put that question through the officer.
Through the chair, we do have point of sale software, and which includes maintaining membership information and also learn to swim information. We can understand where our customers come from. All customers who register for services with us, we can get an understanding of where they come from. Those that are casual attendees and swimmers just paying their $6 or $7 or $8 at the gate, no, we can't, but certainly our gym members, our Learn to Swim members and others, we can. And we do have a thorough understanding of our different membership groups and attendees at each centre that we have.
Councillor Macri?
Yeah, when we talk about Ashfield...
What are they? Are they mostly from here or outside?
I'll call the meeting to order. Councillor Passes. Please desist from interjecting. Councillor Macri has the floor.
I was waiting for the answer.
Sorry, Councillor Passes. Can I ask you to desist from interjecting? Respectfully, please desist. I'll go to Councillor Macri.
When I look at the Ashfield Aquatics Centre, I see we've built a fantastic facility, but it's not a pool for Ashfield. It's not even a pool for the Inner West. It's a regional facility. And if people are coming from out of the area and using it, I don't see any issue in actual residents paying what they pay, but then we charge $1 or $2 more for visitors. You go to the club, at the RSL club, if you're a member, you get the discount, you get the members discount. To offset what Tom is asking for, why can't we go down that model? And we should also be asking, like Strathfield Council or Burwood Council, this is a great facility. Your residents are using this. Are you prepared to contribute to a regional facility? Have we explored any of those things? through the office.
Can I ask a question as well, please?
Sorry, Councillor Macri, was that a further question?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I'll put that question.
Through the chair, there hasn't been any, as far as I'm aware, any discussions with external councils or others about how they might, how we might price up or differentiate prices between various residents. I can say that in terms of consumption of our facilities, the vast majority of people in our suburban areas or our leisure centres and aquatic centres come within 2 to 3k radius. In the case of Ashfield, it's a little bit early to tell and get some really strong data. We've got some excellent data currently, and it's been very busy and very successful. I'd like to give us 12 months of operating so that I can look at that data over the last 12 months and form a view. But at the moment, Ashfield has been very well patronised by local residents. We also get strong bookings, school carnivals and others that do travel to the centre. So it really does both.
Well, if they're prepared to travel, they're prepared to pay an extra $1 to offset some good community outcome.
Did you have a further question, Councillor Macri?
No, that's it. That's all I'll say. Thank you.
Okay.
So, Councillor Byrne, can I just ask a question in relation to the pensioner fee, please?
Yes, yes.
Just of the officers, I'm not quite sure who would know all this, but what we're talking about tonight is not just a pensioner, not just an aged or disability pensioner a reduced rate, but a social services reduced rate. So how do we manage that now at Leichhardt? Do we keep the record of their pension status or so that when they come in, or do they have to show their card every time they come? Because it will have to be very clearly managed, because people like single parents would qualify, unemployed people will qualify, disability pensioners and aged pensioners, but of course not seniors, because if it's just for pensioners, you'd have to have a disability card. So we would have to know where people are coming from, because we would have to ask the card. Am I correct or not?
I'll put that question to the officers.
Through the chair, a person who's currently eligible on a government issued pensioner card, and that may be for a range of different items of being a pensioner person, we would take or check their card if they were coming in to pay their single entry and they requested a pensioner entry, and we would also check their pensioner card should they wish to take out one of the pensioner membership prices or some other category. So when they arrive to purchase, that's when we would do the check. The challenge that we may come into is where we have people who are unemployed or on low incomes who aren't necessarily pensioners. What are the means and the tools by which we might be able to assess their income or their capacity? And I at this stage, I don't know those answers, which is part of the ongoing sort of review and information I'm looking for to get some further information on this item.
Thank you. I think people on unemployment benefits have a concession card, and single parents do too, who are.
That's correct. So
Yeah.
They have got ID.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, councillors, Councillor Drury has agreed to incorporating the Kiat pool amendment. So I don't think there's any need to debate that any further. That's incorporated into the primary motion. We'll move on to the next amendment.
That was mine, wasn't it?
No, yours is a foreshadowed motion, Councillor McKenna. Councillor Kiat, do you wish to speak to your next amendment?
Mayor, can I just accept both of those, please?
Okay. Both of those are incorporated into the primary motion. Now, can I just ask, sorry, just a question of the council officers, which I meant to ask previously in relation to the pool charge. Is there a legal statutory requirement to exhibit that fee change?
Through the chair, yeah, apologies. I've just had confirmation from our general counsel that even if a fee changes through the thing, it needs to be exhibited.
Yeah.
So rather two things, it has to be. So we can't just adopt it if it's different from what was exhibited. It should have been changed at the time we put the budget out on exhibition.
Okay, so Councillor Kiat, for that to be in order, it would need to, or Councillor Drury, Councillor Kiat, for that to be in order, it would need to read that council exhibit a change to the pensioner concession.
Can I just check on that? Because that would suggest that, say we put our fees and charges out on exhibition and we got thousands of people saying you need to change this item, and then we changed at adoption that we would need to re-exhibit it. Is that what's being suggested?
Doesn't sound like what they were saying, but I'll put that question to the officers.
If you like, if Marcia's on the line, I'll get Marcia to clarify, but I just sought
advice. Put that to the General Counsel.
Can you hear me? Hello,
Yes,
can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes, through the chair. The requirement is, so council can adopt the fees that it has in its operational plan because those fees have been publicly exhibited with the operational plan. If council wants to reduce some of those charges, then they need to reduce the charges, and I think it's section 356 of the Local Government Act allows council to reduce charges, but requires the proposed reduction to be publicly notified for 28 days and to enable submissions to be made in relation to those reductions, to the proposed reduction.
So, Councillor Kiat, it's the inverse of what you were suggesting. It's not that we would have to ignore submissions that we received, it's that people have to have an opportunity to make a submission. So I think that advice is very... I think that advice is
my apology is section 6.
I don't think we have to do that. We have to notify for reduction.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. Councillor Passos, I'll ask you to desist from interjecting.
I'm not interjecting. I'm
sorry,
trying
Councillor
to...
Passos, I'll ask you to desist. That's the third time that I've asked you to desist from interjecting. With great respect, I'll ask you to stop this meeting.
Other councillors came in just as I did there.
Councillor Passos, I'll ask you to desist from interjecting respectfully. I'll issue you with a warning with great respect. That's that you've interjected several times now. I don't want the meeting to become disorderly. It's a great challenge for us all to conduct a meeting properly on Zoom. It's very difficult, and it's not helped when people are breaching the code of meeting practice by interjecting. So you've been warned. I'll just go back to the General Counsel for that clarification.
Yes, my apologies. Through the chair, it's section 610 capital E of the Local Government Act, which requires public notification of any reduction of adopted fees.
Okay, thank you for that. The advice from the General Counsel is explicit that in order for the amendment which has been to be incorporated or to be considered, it would need to specify the exhibition of this fee change, which of course would also allow for the report which council officers have flagged to come back to council in combination with it coming off exhibition. So, Councillor Kiat, are you willing to, in following that advice, to amend the wording to indicate that it would be publicly exhibited?
With respect, Mayor, it's now my motion and I'm prepared to accept it.
Okay. So Councillor Drury has accepted an amendment to the wording of what is now point 8, which would read that, which the minute takers have helpfully captured. So that has been amended to reflect the legal advice that we have received. Councillor Drury, can I ask you further to require that the report from council officers, which is pending, be reported back when the fee change comes off exhibition?
I think that's a very helpful suggestion, and I'd be interested in that report canvassing the issues about our contractual relationship to Belgravia.
Thank you for that. So that would mean that the wording of point 8 would then incorporate a further statement that council officers report on the implications of the fee change when the public exhibition has concluded. Now, I've just asked for the cooperation of the minute takers just to draft that for me if you can, because it's difficult to chair the meeting and send an amendment of such wording at the same time. Are you able to help with that, Catherine?
Yes, I'll do that, Mayor.
Thank you very much. We'll come back just to clarify what the wording of that is prior to adopting the primary motion. The other amendments from Councillor Kiat have all been amended, have been incorporated also. So I don't believe there's any need to debate them. Are there further amendments, councillors?
At the risk of saying I'm interjecting, do we vote on these separately, don't we?
Not the amendments that have been incorporated into the primary motion, but what I will do is just ask Councillor Kiat to articulate each of them so everybody's completely clear on what has been incorporated. Councillor Kiat, are you able to do that? If you could speak briefly to your amendments that have been incorporated.
I can do that. Thanks everyone for your contributions on the debate about the pool fees. I think it's worth remembering that in May 2020, there were 11,000 people in our LGA who were job seekers and on youth allowance.
Sorry, Councillor Kiat, you're speaking to the gist of the amendments. You could really just read them out if that's okay, because they've already been incorporated.
I'll try to summarise. So the cycling amendments that we prioritise increasing investment in the future. It was noted in the submissions that this is a problem, and it's something that the bicycle user groups have been discussing with those involved in the cycling committee. The second point about cycling, that we want to include funding for traffic and transport investigations so that we can ensure that we get the grant funding that we need from the state government and that we talk to our bicycle user groups about those investigations. Third point there is that we have an annual training budget for the relevant staff in our traffic and engineering team to allow them to develop their expertise in relation to designing for pedestrians and cyclists. And the final point is that we note that we're seeking. Actually, Councillor Drury, I think we can delete that point because you've actually addressed it in your COVID funding point.
Yes, please do.
Delete point 12. Thanks, Catherine. And then point 13, look, I've raised this because in the report on this item, it's mentioned under the subheading road to budget repair or something like that. The first line item under it is childcare fees. And we've already expressed as a council that we don't see childcare fees in the same realm as budget repair. I think when we think about childcare fees, our primary consideration is the users of our childcare facilities and what's a fair and reasonable rate for them. And we know that those services are more or less sustainable and bringing in some surplus in some cases, and that we're doing a bunch of reform in relation to the management of those services. But I don't think we see them as a vehicle for budget.
Just lost you there, Councillor Kiat. Had you concluded your remarks?
I have, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. So Councillor Passis and everybody else will have the gist of those amendments now. They're incorporated into the primary motion. Further amendments?
Chair.
Councillor Macri.
Chair, just a question through to the General Manager. The $3 million in savings that have been found, I found it hard to track them in the report. Can he explain them to me?
I'll put that question to the General Manager.
Thank you. We've identified them as lumped in the budget as an efficiency. Darryl can correct me if I've got the terminology wrong, but it's on the back of when he first put the budget on exhibition. I'd only been here a little while. We hadn't had a chance to look at all of the assumptions. So with speaking with Morris and Lowe through the work that they're doing, they've looked at the assumptions you can make in your long-term financial plan and the annual budget forecasting in relation to labour, in relation to depreciation. So there was a level of comfort through a discussion with them that we could easily achieve that on an annual basis, because probably what you'll find through the quarterly budget reviews at the moment, just with staffing, the timing that you put staff on when they leave, you do get some savings in there, and we budgeted 100% for that, so it just pulls that back at this stage. So that's how we've ended up with the efficiency. We think it's a more realistic forecasting of what's actually occurring on a year in, year out basis, which I've benchmarked with Morris and Lowe, who do this work across a number of councils.
Okay. And the other question I have is Councillor Jury has stated a point where he's going to commit to a $2 million tree planting program each year. So where does the $2 million come from?
It's thank you through the chair. It's already budgeted for. It's been in there through our previous budget discussions. It's in our long-term financial plan for the next few years on tree planting.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Further discussion, councillors? Any further amendments? There's no further amendments. We're now at the stage where we've got a primary motion, which has been significantly amended, moved by Councillor Drury and Councillor McKenna, and then we've got a foreshadowed motion from Councillor Passos, which is that the rates harmonisation structure should be adopted immediately. Given that was the officer's recommendation, I think that's fair to be considered, so I'm happy to second that, despite the fact that I won't be voting for it. There's no further amendments. I'll go to Councillor Drury for a right of reply.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councillors. I think we've had a good debate in relation to our most important documents and our most important job of the year. And that is our budget and our long-term plans. This is not an easy budget. It is not a simple budget, but it is an exciting budget in that we have an opportunity to progress a number of important initiatives in our community. I'd like to thank all of the staff who have worked on this budget. Councillors should know that the budget process takes well over 6 months in terms of staff work to get to this stage. I understand the points that Councillor Hess made in relation to we need to work out for the future better ways of engaging councillors and the community in that process. And I think in the new council, we'll have that opportunity to have that discussion. So this is, and I would particularly like to thank some of our, I'd particularly like to thank Daryl Jackson, who I think has been great in terms of his processes, in terms of shepherding this along the way. And I'd also like to thank someone whose name I'm quickly trying to find, Peter Levans, for the advice that he has given as I've structured my response to the documents coming forward. I'd like to thank Kathy Edwards-Davis for the work that she does on a large bulk of this budget, which is the capital expenditure, and to the new General Manager in shepherding this through to us today. So in terms of a challenging budget, It is
Councillor Drury,
2 minutes.
Councillor Drury is seeking an extension of 2 minutes of time. I'll move that way. Is there a seconder for that?
Seconded.
Seconded by Councillor Hesse. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Please proceed.
So I think that what we have shown is appropriate stewardship of our almost $2 million of assets. I think we've put aside a reasonable amount of money to renew them. I'd like to see more, but we've put a reasonable amount aside. We have made significant steps along the way to address some of our key environmental issues, such as the need for increased trees in our community and the steps along the way towards our new resource recovery strategy. I think that we have done this in a financially responsible way. We do have an operating deficit, and the operating deficit may increase to $4.5 million, depending on our consideration in relation to providing some additional support to those in our community who are in receipt of Commonwealth Social Security payments. And I don't think that's a devastatingly bad deficit in relation to an operational budget of $445 million. I don't think our council is in bad financial straits. I think that efforts to characterise that as such, quite frankly, are disingenuous. We have a good budget. We have a way forward in terms of harmonising. We have responded to community response to our budget, I think, in an appropriate way. I'd urge all councillors to vote for this resolution.
Okay, thanks very much for that. So with council, just so everybody's clear, we've got the primary motion for adoption of the budget with the various amendments incorporated. Then we've got the foreshadowed motion for the rates harmonisation to be deferred, rates harmonisation to be implemented immediately. So I put the primary motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands and keep them raised. In support, I have councillors De Cruz, Stamoulis, Hesse, Kiat, McKenna, Drury, Porteous, Lockie, York, Iskander, Steer, and myself. All those against, please raise your hands. Against, we have councillors Passis, Macri, and Rosidi. That has been carried. The budget has been adopted. Now, councillors, can I propose that we suspend standing orders to go into confidential session to deal with the items in the confidential papers? Is there a seconder for that?
Could I make an alternative proposal?
Item 2.
Councillor Byrne?
Yep, sure.
We've got another item here as a late item, item 32. There is a time issue on that in terms of the white paper. Could we suspend standing orders and deal with that item 32, before we deal with other items on the agenda?
How about we do it differently and we go into confidential, we resolve to go into confidential session and then we suspend standing orders to deal with item 32 before all other items once we come back into open council.
Mr Mayor, may I ask a question?
Hold on a moment, Councillor Passis, if you could desist from interjecting, please. Councillor Porteous, are you amenable to that?
Mr Mayor, I did not interject.
Sorry, Councillor Passis, if you could desist from interjecting. I'm just responding to Councillor Porteous's procedural proposal. Councillor Porteous?
Yeah, I'm just a bit concerned for the public because by going into confidential items, they will not be able to follow and then they come back again afterwards. I mean, it's pretty early for us. It's 8:25. We don't need to go into confidential session now. We could keep going with the agenda for at least another hour and a half, and then go into confidential session. It would seem better to do it towards the end of the meeting rather than right in the middle of the meeting.
Well, I'm not confident that we will get through the entire. In fact, I'm whatever the opposite of confident is my feeling about the likelihood of getting through the entirety of the agenda. We've so far dealt with one item. I know that was the budget, but we've been going since 6 o'clock, so it's 2.5 hours. I know that included the item, so 2 items in total.
Meeting as well.
Yeah, okay, but the officers have specifically requested the number of the items in confidential session need to be dealt with. So I'd be happy to suspend standing orders.
May I speak?
No, sorry, Councillor Passos, if you could desist from interjecting. I'm just trying to get to consensus with Councillor Porteous on our 2 procedural motions. So I'd be happy to suspend standing orders to deal with item 32 and then for council to go into confidential session. So are you amenable to that, Councillor Porteous?
Yeah.
Okay, so Councillor Porteous will move that we suspend standing orders to deal with item 32 and that council then deal with all confidential matters. I will be the seconder for that. Is there any debate on that procedural amendment? No, I'll put that then. All those in favour? Against?
May I speak?
I'm sorry, Councillor Passos. I just asked if anyone wanted to speak to it. Do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, Mayor. I would like to ask what is urgent about the confidential session?
I'll put that question to the officers.
Thank you. Through the chair, we have a number of items. We distributed a memo round to the councillors this afternoon. So there's the appointment of the planning panel chairs for the Inner West Local Planning Panel. That needs to be done before the end of the financial year. We have a tree management maintenance services contract, which is important to award. We've got a lease to Transport for New South Wales in Camdenville Park, which needs to be acted on. And we've got the review of the organisational structure, which needs to be finalised so we can get on with our advertising for the positions.
Well, may I suggest we have another meeting next week?
Sorry, Councillor Passos. That is not a procedural motion at this point in the meeting. We're seeking to deal with the business so that there's no need for an additional meeting next week. It's only 8:30, so we've got the procedural motion from myself and Councillor Porteous to bring forward item 32, or is it 33, is it?
Mr Mayor, I move dissent from the chair. We have motions that have been on the agenda. Okay. This will be the 6th attempt.
Sorry, Councillor Passos.
I move dissent from the chair.
Well, there's no ruling, Councillor Passos. There is a procedural motion before us, which is being moved by Councillor Porteous and myself.
I am moving dissent from the chair on the way you're treating me through this meeting. Other councillors have interjected. You have not warned them. They have just spoken off the cuff.
Point of order, Mayor. Point of order.
Yes, Councillor Drury.
Point of order. You have not made a ruling. We're about to vote on a suspension of standing order. I don't believe you can move dissent in relation to voting on a motion.
I can move dissent on any issue.
No, sorry, Councillor Passos, with great respect, you're interjecting again. You're not able to move a motion of dissent in regards to a procedural motion which hasn't been which is about to be voted on.
I'm not moving dissent from the procedural motion.
With great respect, Councillor Passos, unfortunately, you are being disorderly, and I will ask you to desist from interjecting and allow the meeting to proceed. And I'll ask for your assistance because it's not easy chairing council meetings on Zoom. It's not easy for all councillors to participate and for us to get through the business. So while you're regularly interjecting, it's having a negative impact on everybody else. So I'll ask you to please respectfully desist from doing so, and I'll try to get on with voting on the procedural motion. So I'll put the Porteous-Byrne procedural motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. In support, I have councillors De Cruz, Stamoulis, Hesse, Macri, Kiat, McKenna, Drury, Porteous, Lockie, York, Raciti, Steer, and myself. All those against? Councillor Passos, are you against the motion? Okay, no response from Councillor Passos. That has been carried. So we'll now move on to item, is it 32 or 33?
30, it's item 32. The Greater Sydney Parklands White Paper and Callan Park, 32.
32. Okay, councillors, discussion?
Yeah, look, I'd like to move an alternative motion.
Yes, please
and
do.
I'd speak to it if I could.
Yeah.
I provided wording to the minute taker, so hopefully she can bring that up. Yeah. Look, I'm really concerned about this white paper and the proposal that basically Callan Park be carved up and it goes to this new entity which was created last year, the Parklands, because this is Greater Sydney Parklands. And I know that the staff are saying, well, if you've taken part of it, take all of it, therefore it stays as one entity. But I really think that's not the spirit in which we have always approached Callan Park, and the I don't think it reflects the expectations of the community either. I think that Callan Park is something that we're very proud of in the Inner West. It's our jewel. It's the jewel of the Inner West. And it's something that has unique and very important historical, cultural, environmental and recreational importance, as well as a history of mental health and well-being on the site, as well as other histories as we've come across in terms of veterans, World War I, and the Indigenous history as well. It's very important for many, many reasons, and it's very local as well. It's our local park. It really belongs to the people. And I think in that spirit, the Callan Park Act and the Callan Park Trust, that has always been envisaged as being locally managed and locally governed. What we would essentially be doing with conceding to handing over the whole of Callan Park to the Greater Sydney Parklands is to say that it's just another park, and it's just some more green space that can be used as however is seen to be the best way to use it by the state government. And that's really never the way I think we've seen Callan Park. And I think that the fact that I think we do have to actually stand up for Callan Park and say, well, no, one, it has to be the whole of Callan Park. You don't start carving it up into different precincts. So the point here I'm making that council rejects the carving up of Callan Park into different precincts. And two, we reject the significant part of Callan Park is being handed over to the Greater Sydney Parklands, which is essentially what has happened in the stealth of night in late December. But also, and really critically, which is number two, the point number two here, that the governance and management of Callan Park should be local and should be under one body, which is the Callan Park Trust, because that has always been what we have fought for many, many years. I actually think that the establishment of this Greater Sydney Parklands could be beneficial in terms of finally getting the state government to acknowledge that parks like Callan Park are really important and need to have a lot more financial investment from the state government. But that doesn't preclude that they should therefore all be lumped into one governance and one management. On the contrary, I think that we are very well equipped here in the Inner West to be able to manage and govern Callan Park, and that's what we should be arguing for as a council. So number 5, the point 5, council reiterates its strong and unwavering support for the Callan Park Act 2002 and the establishment of the Callan Park Trust to manage and govern the whole of Callan Park. I think that's what we should be saying in our submission, not saying, yeah, okay, fine, take it, there you go, we give up. And, the Greater Sydney Parklands can run it as part of Sydney. It's no longer something that's part of the Inner West. That's just not what our community would expect. And I think that would be a tragedy. Callan Park is ours. Let's fight for it. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Porteous. I'll second your primary motion, and I concur with the thrust of all of your statements. The really crucial issue here is whether there will be a public trust established to govern Callan Park. That's been the council's policy position for, over 2 decades. It was the central proposal within the Callan Park Master Plan submitted by Leichhardt Council to the New South Wales government, which occurred just after they were elected 10 years ago. And we've been proven correct at every stage since as to why a trust is needed, because having a hodgepodge of governance arrangements with no one agency responsible for the upkeep of Callan Park is the primary reason that we're seeing demolition by neglect. No one within the government is responsible or feels any sense of responsibility for Callan Park. We know that for regional parks such as this, the best governance arrangement is the one that has been in place for important public parks for centuries. And we can't be backing down on that principle now, especially when we discover that when this was sold to us as a great improvement for Callan Park, that in fact the Greater Sydney Parklands agency is not taking over Callan Park. It's only taking over parts of Callan Park, and that's now, those parts of Callan Park have now had their ownership transferred without us knowing anything about it. This is precisely the problem that we've been talking about all along. You need to have a trust in place that is transparent, that is publicly accountable, that has some independence from ministers to be able to stand up for the best interests of the park and ensure that it is maintained and properly funded. And so I don't think this is a time for us to be going along with what the government is proposing. And to be honest, with respect to Minister Stokes, who I think we all like and recognise is an expert in his field, he hasn't earned our trust on this. He hasn't engaged with the council at all. We've received almost no correspondence. There's been no proper briefing of councillors about what's being proposed here. And in fact, a number of things that have occurred that we were never told about at all and that the public wasn't informed about at all. So if you want trust and cooperation in government, it's important that you are straight with people and transparent with other levels of government when you're proposing big changes to very important parks in the communities that they represent. So thanks very much, Councillor Porteous, and thanks to Friends of Callan Park for being such staunch advocates on this point. Further discussion?
Mr Mayor.
Councillor Stamos.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I've expressed my concerns a number of times about the new governance model. It's an untried and an untested governance model for parks, as I'm aware of. I've asked questions on a number of occasions to see how similar models such as the GSP being proposed do work, and do they work effectively in the interests of communities. Those questions haven't been answered, so I still lack the confidence and I still lack any certainty that this is a good model for managing major parks throughout Sydney or anywhere. And I believe that's still an open question now, and I'll await any response and any information to the contrary. But until then, I'm uncertain about this particular governance structure. The other question that's been raised by both yourself, Mr Mayor, and Councillor Porteous is this suggestion of the splitting up of the ownership of Callan Park. It is one entity and should be considered as one very significant, wonderful and beautiful entity as part of our community, and we should fight for that. And I do agree wholeheartedly that that should be by way of a trust that's formed within our own community and our own council.
How can I unmute? I want to talk.
And therefore,
sorry, Councillor Passos, I know you're inadvertently interjecting this time, but if you could, please.
There's something wrong with the computer.
Yeah, I know, but if you could work that problem out on mute rather than interrupting Councillor Stamoulis, that would be great.
Oh, yes, you're really concerned about Councillor Stamoulis.
Sorry, Councillor Passis. I'll just respectfully request again. I'm sorry to have to do this, but I will issue a second warning to you if you won't desist from interjecting. Councillor Stamoulis has the floor.
Thank you. As I was saying, Callan Park is one entity. It lacks any coherence, that it should be divided up into 2 or more different ownership models. And I do believe that the trust is the best way to go. I'll be supporting this motion. Thank you.
May I speak? May I speak next?
Councillor Passis, yep.
I think we are the last people to tell the government what to do or anybody else about Callan Park, given that we did not speak to our residents and we went down and cut down 10 or 11 trees. So I think we are the last people to be the caretakers and the saviours and really concerned about Callan Park. I just cannot believe the time wasting and what is said here tonight. And that's all it is. We're very concerned about Callan Park, and I find it very interesting, not a murmur out of the Greens about the report, nor the trees being removed, nor from the people of Callan Park. So I don't know how long people are supposed to sit here and listen to this and all this great concern for Callan Park.
Further discussion, councillors?
Yes, can I ask some questions?
Councillor De Cruz?
I've got a question from the community. It's regarding that the DA for the waterfront green. I don't know if Hajit's on the line and can answer it, but it's really about who's going to approve that DA and whether I was speculating whether a planning proposal is required for what's happening at.
Point of order, Mayor. Does this relate
Yeah,
to
it
the
does.
white paper?
Yeah.
It certainly doesn't relate to the white paper, but I'll just allow some leniency here, Councillor Drury. Councillor De Cruz has got a specific question about Callan Park, so I'll put that to the officers.
So it's about the planning of waterfront.
The DA, Margarita.
Sorry?
It's a DA.
Yeah,
It's already been
question's
lodged.
been asked already. I'll put the question to the officers.
Through the chair, can I get that question repeated? Sorry, I'm online now. I just was struggling to listen here.
Thanks for that. Councillor De Cruz, do you want to clarify your question?
It's about the DA for Waterfront Oval and the process that will go through for approval or community consultation, whatever. If you could outline that. And whether, and I guess the inquiry was whether council can be more involved in that process.
Put that question to the officers.
Through the chair. Thank you. Through the chair. Council, the state government has approached council and have be lodging a whole series of development applications to redevelop the waterfront down there. Whilst council is the consent authority, it is Crown-owned land, and council has very limited power in what can be done, as the planning legislation is completely different. It's not under the standard local environmental plans and the development control plans for the area. In terms of consultation, the state government have been consulting with council in the lodgements of all the applications. All the applications have not yet been lodged with council. We've only had a few preliminary pre-development application discussions with the state government on the lodgements, and also have consulted with various stakeholders within council to provide technical feedback on the matters. And then the development application that will be lodged, or the various development applications that will be lodged, will go out to community consultation and will be assessed accordingly. And that will provide the community the ability to provide comments back to council, and then an appropriate determination will be made. I hope that answers the question.
I guess the question was, so the planning panel, so our local planning panel will make that determination.
Yes, the local planning panel will make that determination as council staff in itself don't have the delegation to do so.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that.
Could I ask a question about that as well? My understanding from reading the Act is, as you've said, Hajit, the council is the consent authority. And in terms of that, I know previous determinations regarding Callan Park, because we are the consent authority as acknowledged in the Act, those determinations don't go to a planning panel. They actually come to council, to full council for a determination. So has that been checked with our legal with our legal authorities here in council?
Put that question to the officers.
Through the chair, we've actually, yes, we've reviewed that legislation, and the outcomes of that review in consultation with our legal team is that the local planning panel makes the decisions on those matters. It doesn't come to actual council forums such as this for determination.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that. If there's no further discussion, I'll go to Councillor Porteous for a right of reply.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Look, I'll be brief because I know we've got other items on the agenda, but I would seek that all councillors would support this motion tonight, which is very much in line with the expectations of the community, not just the community of Rozelle and Lilyfield, but really I think Callan Park has much wider ownership in terms of the inner west. It's really considered to be, as I said previously, the jewel of the inner west in terms of the 69 hectares of land there and the very, very important and very beautiful heritage buildings that we hold on the site, the biodiversity, the environmental, and of course some great recreational and cultural facilities, including a number of sites of Indigenous importance and heritage importance. So I would hope that we would be as one in terms of saying that this should remain as a whole, and it should be managed and governed locally through the Callan Park Trust. If we could have your support on that, that would be great.
Okay, I'll now put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands and keep them raised. In support, I have councillors De Cruz, Stamoulis, Hesse, Macri, Kiat, McKenna, Drury, Porteous, Lockie, Steer, York, and myself. All those against? Against, I have councillors Passis and Rosidi. That has been carried. I've just been notified, councillors, that there's one other item which in the open council that does need to be, which has a time imperative, and that is about the councillors' remuneration. But I don't believe there's anyone who's registered to speak to that and who's awaiting the outcome. So that could be dealt with after we go into Committee of the Whole. So I'll move that we go into Committee of the Whole. Is there a seconder for that? Oh, sorry, I've got that wrong. We've already adopted a motion to do that. So we'll go into Committee of the Whole. Catherine, can I ask you to please notify us when the broadcast has been discontinued?
Will do, Matt.